And then followed in an almost unbroken line some of the most remarkable leaders in the history of any university. Time does not permit me to do any of them justice. I wish that I could have been half as good as they were, because they set a high standard. Let me mention just a few of those of that generation with whom I'm most familiar. If I tried to do more than call all of their names, we would be here all night. Here are some of the editors that I have known and greatly admired. Paul Newton, a highly respected lawyer and business leader in Gulfport. Jimmy Caldwell, later mayor of Tupelo before his untimely death. Alvin Krebs, who in 1951 called for the integration of Ole Miss, and who went on to be a highly honored writer for the New York Times. The inimitable Paul Pittman, raconteur and storyteller, longtime editor of the Tylertown Times, and my very close friend. Larry Frank, one of the state's most distinguished attorneys. Liz Nichols Shiver, to whom all of us are indebted for getting us together tonight and who has inspired all of us over our long association with her. Thank you, Liz. Jim Autry, nationally acclaimed poet, former editor of Better Homes and Gardens, corporate executive, and now most notable of all, the husband of Sally Peterson. Wally Sherwood, a remarkably gifted young man from my hometown of Grenada. Ann Flaw, Neil Woodrow, Travis Stallworth, Stan Dillman, courageous crusading editor of the Neshoba County Democrat. Mac Dale, Jimmy Robertson, whom I had the privilege of naming to the Mississippi Supreme Court, and whose opinions on that court provides some of the most delightful literary prose that anyone could want to read. Sidney Brower, who provided such brave leadership and inspiration to some of us timid folks who were in politics at that time during the Meredith crisis. John Carlew, who continued that leadership as editor and later as legislator and leader of the bar. Catherine Webb and Ed Williams, who as the editorial page editor of the Charlotte Observer, helped keep North Carolina on a fairly progressive course for some 40 years. And then there were the Fair brothers, Gene and George, the only editor brothers in the history of the newspaper. Gene, a distinguished judge in Hattiesburg, and George, my next door neighbor, president of the State Bar Association. And then there were others. I'm just going to have to quit in a minute. Bobo Champion, Otis Timms, Ken Rector, Travis Stallworth. I could go on and on, but I have run out of time. Not out of talent, not out of names, but I've just plain run out of time. Believe me when I tell you I can make a fairly long speech about the accomplishments of every editor whom I have known, not to mention the huge number that I have not known as well, and I can only say that the ever-increasing caliber and quality of leadership of the Mississippian has been a source of pride and even envy to those of us who came before. I'm grateful that the torch has been placed in such able hands. My biggest regret is that I have not been able to know more of them personally, and I am relieved that I do not have to compete with them intellectually. And before I conclude, let me invoke what we old legislators used to call a point of personal privilege. Amid this array of journalistic all-stars, and they truly all are, I'm going to have the temerity to select a most valuable player, the captain of the team. My candidate not only was a superb editor of the Mississippian, but he went on to become one of our state's greatest editors. When I think of a single newspaper editor who did more to transform education in this state and lead Mississippi into a more progressive way of thinking about itself, I think first of Charles Ole. Fortuitously, he came to Jackson in the spring of 1982 as editor of the Clarion Ledger, a newspaper which over the years had not been regarded as a leader of enlightened opinion. I was struggling along in my third year as governor and fighting desperately but unsuccessfully to enact a badly needed education reform program. It's impossible for me in this short time that I have left to describe the impact which Charles Overby and his newspaper had on the passage of that vital legislation. When in that fall of 1982 I called a special session to consider this bill, which had already been defeated in 2 previous regular sessions, I was greeted by derision and pessimism. Many old politicians denounced me for wasting my time and their money. What they did not reckon on, however, was the power of the press, as generated by Charles Overby, among others, and there are others here. Charles Dunnigan down at Macomb was one of those who led the fight, and there were so many others. David Cruz, you were working with all of them. The Tupelo Journal was right in the middle of it. What they did not reckon on, though, was how strong that influence of the press could be. The Clarion Ledger literally shamed the legislature into passing that legislation. He would put on the front page in a box, Hall of Shame, listing the legislators who were voting against the bill. Without his tireless support, there would have been no Education Reform Act. And for that magnificent effort, Charles and his paper won a Pulitzer Prize, and Mississippi moved into a new mode of thinking. It represented one of Mississippi journalism's finest hours, and Charles, I give you my great appreciation and my respect. Now we come to the time when all of us in this room tonight can take so much satisfaction in recognizing the bonds of memory and purpose that bring us together. Whether we admit it or not, we are a part of an unbroken chain of events and an unbreakable chain of events and an incredible change marked by war and riot and depression and tragedy. But more importantly, by the faith and optimism and belief in the worthiness of our efforts and in our concern for each other and for our country and for our great university. Now, on this good night, let us all acknowledge that there is a journey that we still have to continue on, for the task is not done. So let us tonight dare to do more and be grateful that we can. Thank you very much.